Donald Trump objects to how this order is being implemented in New York. Of course, Judge Engoron made a decision that he owes about $500 million to Tish and New York for who knows what, so-called fraud. But in the process of working through this opinion, we also have to come up with a judgment. And Trump says that the judge has not included him in that process in contravention of New York law. And so Trump's team is sending a letter in to Engoron saying, we'd like a stay. We'd like to be able to confer with you about how this judgment will be entered. We have things like payments and interest rate and all the things. So let's talk about it. And Engoron is saying, no, get out of here. I don't care what you have to say. The rules don't matter in my courtroom. He just denies all of it and says, take it up on appeal. So we'll see what happens next. Alina has some thoughts on what their plans are that she'll share with us. But this is the person who's behind it all. And this is another new montage from Tish James with even more insane language and behavior from this woman. She's supposed to be the attorney general, a prosecutor for the state that does justice, doesn't prosecute political opponents. But that's not what we get here. And people like this, when you give them power, they bring these results like good communists taking other people's properties and trying to destroy their life's work. This is who she is.
He's called me venomous.
We will fight back to your attempt to bring Trumpism to New York City.
He's called me disgraceful.
Of the fact that they stole the Supreme Court seat, an illegitimate president and an illegitimate member of the United States Supreme Court.
He's called me radical.
Listen, we know he's crazy. We know he doesn't have a sound mind. We know he's out of control. We know he's losing it. We know his days are numbered and we will come together.
He's called me a racist.
We've got to stand up to an administration which is too male, too pale, and too stale.
The most racist, bigoted stuff you've ever heard, right? Look at this stale, male, pale, white guy right here. He's like, yeah, I don't know what to do. Should I smile? She's talking about how useless I am. I don't know what to do.
Too male, too pale, and too stale.
All these white dudes like, yeah, we are too male. Yeah, we are too pale. Yeah, we are a little stale. Weird dudes.
Too male, too pale, and too stale.
Thank you.
All right, so that's Tishy, okay? Now, that's the people who are in charge of this, and it might be coming to a city near you if you're in one of these deranged locations, so keep your eyes out on these people. But here's what's happening, okay? They're in charge. They're the ones who are orchestrating all of this, and I want to show you some back and forth that's been happening. So we had an opinion from Judge Engoron. He came out and he said $450 million, Trump, that's his opinion. Now, how does that get executed? Well, we have to talk about this in the form of a judgment and orders and the mechanics, right? So you can come to terms on a deal, but then you have to execute the deal. So the question is, how do you confer on the judgment and how do you get this all entered? It might be a good idea to talk to the defense and the people who have to do the paying and move all the things around. And so generally speaking, you confer. So what has happened here over these last few days is there's been some emails back and forth, and I want to share them with you. So back on the 21st, just yesterday, from the date that we're recording this, there was this email from Engoron. Okay, so Engoron sent this back over to Trump's defense. He says, okay, dear Mr. Roberts, and these are all their emails, and Alina Abba's on there, says, I have compared the language of the Attorney General's proposed judgment. So we have an opinion from the court. Now the Attorney General proposed a judgment, and the defense says, we haven't seen any of this. Like, we didn't get involved in this judgment. Where'd this come from? So they sent an email to Engoron and said, hello, can we be involved in this? And she says, Engoron, the NIP, says, look, I've already compared, okay, Tishy, she sent me her proposed judgment, and I looked at it, and I compared it to my February 16th opinion and order, and the former from Tish exactly tracks the latter. Okay, so Tish's proposed judgment matches my order, except for the addition of the addresses and the blanks for the interest amounts. Okay, so it's the form that's going to be imposed. So he says back to Robert, please let me know by 5 p.m. today if you object in specific ways about how your counter judgment would differ. Given the foregoing, I see no need for a motion or a conference on this. Okay, so he's like, I don't really want your opinion. We're not going to confer. And this is all just settled. So let me know if you have any objections to this. Trump obviously did. So they sent this one back. They say, all right, dear Judge Engoron, so people versus New York, Trump says, we write on behalf of Trump in response to your email that you just said to us that you see no need for a motion or conference. We'd like to, talk to you about this. And you directed Trump to let the court know by 5 p.m. if we object. So we copied that email. And remember, you said that to us. So here's what they say. They say, Trump, Your Honor, as you asked, we respectfully submit here to you that the concerns raised in their letter of of today's date about the Attorney General's unilateral submission. So in other words, Tishy just sent her proposed judgment in, sent it over to Allison Greenfield, the clerk of the court, stating that it is made on motion, merit full compliance with the rules. In other words, she's making a motion and you have to follow the rules. And Tishy just sent it right to the clerk of the court. Nobody told us about it. Now, your direction, you said to us that you see no need for a motion or a conference before this judgment because the judgment exactly tracks the 16 decision. It ignores the fact that the proposed judgment expressly states that a motion has been made, and that is simply wrong. The Attorney General has not filed any motion on notice nor moved to settle the proposed judgment. So she's unseemly rushing to memorialize a judgment that violates all the accepted practice in the state of New York. So she's essentially creating this judgment, basically colluding to come up with this judgment, and there's not been a formal practice on this. In other words, she did not file a motion for a judgment and then give the defense notice about this. She just kind of submitted a form to you that you're just adopting. Now, there are rules about how this stuff gets proposed. Like you don't just send stuff in, you copy the other party has an opportunity to respond and all this. You're violating that, okay? All accepted practice is being violated. Now, should the court decide that the standard processes that are set in the rules, the CPLR, and the Uniform Civil Rules, if you say that they don't apply in this case and you proceed to enter Tishy's proposed judgment, like if you're just gonna not include us, the rules say you should, but if you don't, then we would request that the court stay enforcement of that judgment for 30 days. Now, given that we already have your friend, your court-appointed monitor, who's in place, there is no prejudice to Tishy if you briefly stay the enforcement to allow us to go through the official, orderly post-judgment process, particularly, since you billed us $500 million. So can you please follow the rules so we can have conversations about this, so we can come up with a conferred judgment, get that entered, and, start moving the money around. Now, in addition, the reason we want to do this stuff is because there are 2 errors that Tishy shoved in her garbage judgment, and we have thus far identified in the extremely limited time that's provided by the court. So the reason why you want to notify the other side is, so that they have a say on it, or the courts just enter judgment without any notice. Notice is such a huge part of our law. Like the courts can't just act without you and you just show up one day and you're like, oh, you got charged with murder, you're going to prison. You're like, what? You have to notify someone, right? That is how the court establishes jurisdiction. You don't want to go back in the old dictatorial countries that we're slowly turning into, where there was no notice. The court could just act without you even being there. So a hold of this judgment, it's proposed, and there's 2 problems on it. First, the date on which interest begins to accrue for the judgment against Alan Weisselberg is January 9th, not May 11th, 2022. So you see these pieces of garbage over there. They wanted to get an additional half of a year of interest. So they said Alan Weisselberg, his interest payments start on May 11th, 2022. Wrong. They start on January 9th, 2023. They were trying to squeeze in additional interest. Oops. The Attorney General's proposed judgment seeks nearly 8 additional months of interest that are provided for in the February 16th decision. So she just inserted more. Second, several of these addresses for the defendants in the proposed judgment are incorrect, and they're set forth below in a chart containing proper addresses for certain defendants. And you'll notice that all of these addresses are in Palm Beach, Florida, and Jupiter, Florida. We're moving to Florida, so update our addresses here. You have the wrong addresses. Here's our correct addresses. And lastly, at 423, the Attorney General e-filed slightly revised proposed judgment, which purports to make certain changes based on advice that she received from the judgment clerk, whoever that happens to be. And again, the Trump defense is not a part of any of this. So they're just talking about all this. And then she filed something. Now, given that Trump only received the revised proposed judgment a few moments ago, we've not even had a chance to review it. However, the slightly revised proposed judgment only further serves as proof that Tishy is rushing to memorialize a judgment. It violates all the accepted practice in New York State, and it's intended to prejudice Trump. Trump reiterates their request that the court set a return date for the proposed judgment that affords Trump sufficient time to submit a proposed counter judgment as proper. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me, signed by Robert and Robert at the law offices of Robert and Robert. And so the state responded to this. They say, oh, we object. Sorry, no. Engoron, Areola the Nip, we write to respond to Robert's letter. He's objecting to our proposed judgment. They say, we agree actually that the pre-judgment interest on the disgorgement against Weisselberg, it actually does start when they say, yeah, so we were wrong on that. We tried to squeeze in 8 additional months of interest. They say, oops, that was an inadvertent error. Yeah, right. But we disagree with the remaining points. They say the decision did not direct the parties to settle judgment, so there was no need to confer prior to us submitting our proposed judgment, and we're not aware of any other provisions that requires us to file a formal motion to submit this. The conclusion position was already detailed in your order, and so, Judge, you said there is no further room for debate, nor do they provide any other basis for the stay, and so they're only requesting relief to delay. And finally, the court should reject their attempts to change their business because we already know they're in New York. So, Your Honor, don't change their address because they're in New York. They're not leaving New York. And they work in New York, so don't change it. Signed by Andrew Ammer. All right, for Tishy's office. I'm sure he's having a really fulfilling career over there. So that's him. And then Engoron ultimately is going to be denying all this. Let me show you the emails here and telling Trump to take it up on appeal. And so we'll see what Alina says about this. But he says, okay, this was the original email. Let me know if you have any objections. They said, yeah, we do. They say, Engoron, the judgment clerk advised us that because this is from the state, from Andrew. So he says, hey, Engoron, you need to sign this document in a different way. Add a final line instructing the clerk to enter the judgment. We'll file the revised proposed. So in other words, they're colluding together. Okay. Engoron and the state are sending emails about what the final judgment should look like, and they are not including Trump's team on the back half. They say, Engoron says, okay, dear Mr. Robert, I have confirmed that the judgment that the Attorney General has proposed has been updated to address that error where we tried to rip you off with 8 additional months of interest. However, there's no record evidence in the record to corroborate your claim that your addresses are incorrect. However, we do have, you can't change your address. So we're leaving them in New York. Now, you've again asked for time to file a proposed counter judgment again without explaining why hers is incorrect. And again, you haven't specified how your judgment would differ. And so the proposed judgment accurately reflects the spirit and the letter of my decision. And so accordingly, I'm going to sign this order and send it to the clerk for further processing. And so Trump's attorneys responded and they said, Your Honor, okay, well, we're in receipt of your email and the court does not address our request. So they're talking around each other. Trump's people are saying, we need a date. That's all. Please set a date under the rules so we can meet and confer, and then we'll have an updated filing, proposed judgment for you and all the things. He says, let me know what you're going to put in there and then I'll give you the date. He said, that's not what I'm asking for. I'm asking for the date, then we can do it. Well, I'm not going to give you the date unless you can tell me why. We're in circles here. So, okay, so Your Honor, it sounds like you did not address Trump's request for a temporary stay. Thank you for not addressing that. And you haven't allowed us to protect our appellate rights, and you haven't contributed to an orderly post-judgment process. And so, as the court is well aware, the monitor is already remaining in place, and as such, there is no exigency or potential prejudice to Tish for a brief stay. And to the contrary, the prejudice to the defendants is considerable. Respectfully, Clifford S. Robert. So, Judge, you didn't give us anything. We're not giving you anything here. Engoron responds, okay, Mr. Robert, well, you have failed to explain, much less justify, any basis for a stay, and I'm confident that the appellate division will protect your appellate rights. So take it up with the other courts. I don't care. I don't want to hear from you. Order is being entered. Judgment is being entered, and it's from Tish, and they have no real say or involvement in it at all because this is New York, this is Engoron, and this is Leticia. So they're just running roughshod over the whole process. Trump really has no choice but to appeal it, and Alina gets asked about that. She doesn't reveal much on this, but here is what one of Trump's lawyers, Alina, has to say about this when she is talking with people over on Fox.
Hail Mary pass that circumvents the reality that that money has to be paid, whether it's in a bond or in cash, before you can go to the appellate process. Is there any workaround at all?
So there's a couple things, right? And I'll speak generally. You can post a bond, which is an option. You can tell the judge that you should set aside the verdict because it's insane, which this is.
You'd be asking him to do that?
Those options are on the table. I will never show my cards, Martha. You know I'm too good to do that. But I will tell you that we have a great team. I'm proud of our team, and we're working around the clock to figure out what strategically is the best move. One thing I can tell you is that her goal of tearing down the Trump organization, her goal of tearing down the individuals that work so hard, including on his campaign, his family, and the list goes on and on, her goal is frankly not going to succeed. That's all I'm willing to say.
All right, nicely done. So I agree. I think Trump seems like he is as animated as ever. You know, he seems like he's just out there saying, let's just keep winning. We're just going to keep winning. Our success is going to be our revenge. And I think that's a good positive frame on a very terrible situation where our own governments, so-called ours, they are now running to be elected to take out their political opponents. They win because their constituency has apparently nothing better that they want to work for in their own communities. They'd rather just tear other things down than build something in their own communities. But all right. And Trump is now having to battle the process as well, right? So we're going to see what the judgment looks like and what the requirements will be from the court. And Alina and the team will, I'm sure, have some answers for us on what the next level appeal looks like. And that will be fun to see. So we're going to be here continuing to cover this one and more, my friends. Thank you for joining us as we do. Thank you for subscribing. Thanks for sharing our channel with a friend or family member. Invite them to come over to our live streams so they can join us and have some fun as we're covering all this madness out there. We've got some great links in the description below. Don't forget to check out Watcher Lodge. We've got some great events coming up, and we have a lot of fun at Locals, which is our members-only community. So if you're looking for some extra content, streams in the morning, Saturday shows, watchingthewatchers.locals.com is the place to find us. We'll see you there and back here on the next one.